To swaddle or not to swaddle your baby? That is the question. I'm Adriana. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist of 14 years. I have worked in the NICU and I have also worked with newborns overall and baby or kiddos from 0 to 3. Now let's dig into swaddling. I'm sure you've heard of swaddling benefits, and I'm sure that you have heard of swaddling issues that can occur during this newborn stage. Let's dig into both so I could help you guys make better decisions on whether you should or you shouldn't swaddle your newborn baby. So let's talk about the pros. Number one would be it decreases the startle or the moral reflex. The moral reflex is basically when the baby, you put him down, and if the baby isn't swaddled, they end up flailing their arms back and they end up waking up. And that's very typical and very normal for a baby to have this moral reflex. So when swaddling the baby, it decreases that. So they're definitely not waking up. And it increases the chances of the baby to sleep longer, which is pro number 2. And when they end up sleeping a little longer, you end up getting a little bit of a longer sleep as well too. Now, the pro number 3, it also can mimic the womb. And in the womb, obviously, when the baby is stretching or moving their arms out, they are able to recoil their arms back in. And when they are able to recoil their arms back in, it gives them a sense of a safe space. So that's definitely something that the baby can calm down to a lot quicker, especially when they are not being swaddled. Now let's look at the cons of the swaddling. There's a little bit more cons than pros. So con number 1, it can delay the moral reflex. Now let's rewind in terms of that. I am a pediatric OT, and I have heard different stories in terms of like chiropractors and also other therapists that are mentioning that, swaddling your baby can delay the moral reflex. But there are other things that can also delay the moral reflex, not just the swaddling. So this is definitely a little bit of a controversial topic. And if you're a therapist and you do have some sort of study that specifically talks about swaddling that delays the moral reflex, please let me know about it because I would love to see it. So that would be great. But typically the moral reflex integrates between 4 to 6 months of age, and swaddling can delay it. But there's other things that can also delay it as well too. So for example, birth trauma is one of them. So for example, if the baby was C-sectioned or if the baby was premature, if the baby had any particular developmental delays. So for example, any crawling issues or rolling issues or anything like that. Neurological conditions is definitely something. So like cerebral palsy or, ADHD, autism. And another thing that can also delay the moral reflex can also be a container baby. So what a container baby is if the baby is constantly in the car seat, if they're constantly in a stroller. So check this video up here about different things that can delay a newborn baby development. So these are a few things that can delay the moral reflex, but not necessarily just the swaddling that can delay it. So that's definitely a con. Definitely if you end up deciding on swaddling your baby, make sure that you don't swaddle them all the time. Con number 2 is increasing the risk of suffocation. So there are situations that can happen if you're not safely swaddling your baby. And typically it's when the baby starts getting out of the swaddle and moving the blanket up and they have the blanket completely covering their face. They can definitely be suffocating. Or the other thing too that can happen is if they continue to be swaddled and they know how to roll. Sometimes there's babies that learn how to roll at 4 months, and typically by then they should not be swaddled at all whatsoever. And there's some babies that even accidentally roll at 3 months of age as well too. So if they do roll on their tummies and they are swaddled, then that can increase the risk of suffocation and SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, which is something that needs to be known. And which leads me over to number 3, which is overheating risk. So making sure that you're picking the right swaddle and the right material to swaddle your baby, which can decrease overheating of the baby. Make sure that you get breathable fabrics for that. Con number 4 is increased risk of hip dysplasia if you are not swaddling your baby correctly. So check out this video up here on how to decrease hip dysplasia. It's not just the swaddling, but there's other issues as well too that can increase hip dysplasia in a newborn baby or babies from 0 to 12 months of age. So check that out. Now, developmental hip dysplasia or hip dysplasia in general is basically if you're tightly swaddling the baby, especially around the hips, and they don't have that free movement, then issues start happening and arising where you put more stress around those hips, and that's when the hip socket is not aligned and they are starting to be misaligned. So hip dysplasia is definitely something that can be caused because of the tight swaddle. Now, con number 5, which is something that was kind of interesting and I wanted to mention this, but it's basically delayed self-soothing. Now, typically, in my opinion, as a OT, I don't feel like babies should learn how to self-soothe, especially a newborn baby. But I think what the point is of this is that per this research study, which is the Early Human Development article, they ended up mentioning that those babies that are very dependent on the swaddle don't know how to bring their hands to their mouth to be able to self-soothe themselves if they're feeling somewhat distressed as they get older. So I thought that was interesting, and I think it's important to mention because I do have a video up here of like not to take out the baby's hands out of their mouth, because it's important to have the baby learn how to place their hands in their mouth for many developmental purposes and reasons. Obviously, we don't want them to thumb suck or anything like that. So anyways, check out that video up here. But it is nice to have the hand available to be able to root towards the hand, to be able to suckle on the hand, and, you know, to be able to calm themselves down up to a certain extent. So these are basically the pros and the cons when it comes to either you want to swaddle your baby or you don't want to swaddle your baby. Now, if you want to see a video up here that's a little bit more detailed on how to swaddle your baby safely, check this video up there. I do have a visual about that, and also the materials and the fabrics and swaddles that I would recommend. So check that out. Another thing too is if you don't want to swaddle, I also have another video in terms of alternatives to swaddling. But I think it's just overall the decision, your own family decision, because honestly, like, we have to look at the whole family. If you have 3 other kiddos and they're under the age of 5 and you have a newborn baby, that is pretty stressful and you want to sleep. And it's understandable if you ended up swaddling your other kiddos and this is something that you already know how to do. And the second thing too is that we also have to understand families as well that refuse, or not refuse, but do not want to swaddle their baby because they're afraid of delaying their moral reflex. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about how to integrate their moral reflex and activities to do, check out this video up there. I think it's important to look at the whole entire family as a whole and respect that family's decision. There's no major pros and cons and, you know, that kind of thing. I think it's based on what the family decides on. So I just wanted to leave it up to you, and I just wanted to inform you guys about the pros and the cons when it comes to swaddling. So pretty much that's it. If you really like this video, go ahead and put some happy faces down there. And if you want to share this, go for it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell as well too, so you know when I'm uploading. I'm trying to upload 1 to 2 videos a week starting right now in April. So other than that, yes, this is again Adriana. I'm a pediatric OT. Check me out. All right, I'm out. See you later.